Welcome to our sponsored program's Budgeting Basics. These videos are designed to help you understand the budgeting process and enable you to create a draft budget for your sponsored project. Today we will be talking about how to support students on your sponsored project, whether JMU students or external students, whether undergraduate or graduate students, and whether they are wage employees or paid a stipend. All of these are topics that we will discuss in this video today. Now, I do want to say these videos do not replace working with our grants specialists. Our grants specialists here in OSP are experts in the nuances of uniform guidance and know details beyond what we will get into here. They also read through the rules for your specific program to make sure to catch any unique rules that apply. Your assigned grants specialist will work with you individually to construct a budget that meets your needs and complies with all the sponsor and JMU rules and regulations. But having said that, we know that there are a lot of questions around where numbers come from, and folks would like to be able to put together draft budgets, for example, to estimate the costs for their project to know if it's too ambitious for the program they're considering. So these videos will give you an overview of the process to help you get started. If you want to support a student on your grant, the first question you have to address is, should the student, whether undergraduate or graduate, be paid a wage or a stipend? For sponsored programs purposes, the definitions of these are that a stipend should be used when the primary purpose is educational training or research support for students. Stipends can also be used to support specific concrete goals like providing housing or travel support for the student. The key thing is for a stipend, there's generally no obligation to perform any specific assigned tasks. On the other hand, wages are appropriate when the individual is being compensated for work, even if that work is being done on a temporary basis. Now, if looking at these definitions, you're a little bit confused about how JMU's GA-ships and other graduate student support fits into this, stay tuned. We're going to come back to that. Now, let's start with the wage case. Wages are typically used whenever you have existing JMU students. Most undergraduate positions, including research assistants, are wage employees. This also straightforwardly applies when you are seeking to hire a graduate student who already has a GA-ship or some other funding to do work on your sponsored project. This also typically applies for most summer graduate student employment. Before going further, we do want to remind you of JMU Human Resources 15-hour limit. This imposes that for all non-full-time employees, including students, the total number of hours worked at JMU, all JMU jobs combined, must be less than 1,500 hours in each year. Please be aware of this limit when you are planning for how many students and how many hours you're going to support on your sponsored project. When it comes to wage employees, we recommend using the supervisor resources on the Student Employment at JMU webpage. In particular, the student position description form can help clarify the work that you expect the student to do. The second page has the pay scale for student workers based on the level of knowledge, skill, and abilities for the position. This is drawn from the Student Employee Supervisor Handbook, which is also a useful reference, especially when it's time to hire your student employee. You may also want to refer to JMU Policy 1334 on student employment. With this information, you should have an expected hourly rate for your student worker. As in our previous videos, we recommend going with the highest rate you would pay if instead of a single value, you come up with a range. This is because it's your actual costs that will be charged to the sponsored program, and so it's important that you have enough funding in your grant to cover those costs, whatever they end up being. Additionally, you will need to know the total number of hours you would like each student to work on your project, as well as the total number of students you plan to employ. Now that you have this information, let's see how this goes into our budget. So now let's see where we can find the templates on OSP's website. This is our website. In this bar at the left, you'll see Budget Development. If you click here, you can see that the first option is Overview, Templates, and Resources. This brings you to this page, where scrolling down, you can see our templates. There's an NSF-specific budget template, as well as an SF424 budget template and an R&R budget template. For the rest of this video, we're going to use this generic budget template so that it's as broad as possible. Students who are receiving wages are entered under personnel in this section at the top. We enter undergraduate and graduate student workers separately so that they can be distinguished in the budget justification and because they are frequently paid different rates. We also distinguish between academic year employment and summer employment for reasons that I will explain in a few minutes. So let's come up with an example. Let's say that we are going to pay an undergraduate research assistant $14 per hour and a graduate technician $17 per hour. And let's say that we are going to employ them during the academic year. I would start by putting those wage amounts in this rate column here, 14 and 17 for their hourly rate. The next column is the total number of hours in the year that I expect to employ them. Here at JMU, we typically take there to be 39 weeks in the academic year, so that is equal to 9 person months. And so let's say that I intend to employ my undergraduate research assistant 10 times per week. I would put an equal sign to do a calculation and then put 39 times 10 into this column. Although perhaps I might want to take some weeks out to account for winter break. On the other hand, let's say that I think I will need my graduate technician to just do 20 hours of work total on the project. So then I would just put the number 20 in here. And then finally, I will need to say the number of employees of each type I will have. Maybe I want to have 2 undergraduate research assistants, but I'm only going to need 1 graduate technician. Thus, 2 and 1. Now I'm finally ready to start calculating. For my year 1 costs, I would put equals to do a calculation. I would take my hourly rate times the number of hours I expect to employ this position, and then times the number of people, hence that value. I would do the same thing then for my graduate students, the hourly rate times the number of hours, and then times the number of people. That gives my year 1 expenses. As in our previous videos, we're going to ignore the next 2 columns that describe cost sharing. That will be covered in our cost sharing video. Depending on which template you're using, you may already have values automatically entered for year 2 and year 3 and so on. In this template, our general template, they're not automatically calculated. And that's because some sponsors do and some sponsors don't allow you to take account of a projected cost of living increase. If your sponsor does not allow you to take into account a projected cost of living increase, then your year 2 cost would just be the same as your year 1, and your year 3 cost would be the same as year 2. On the other hand, whenever the sponsor allows it, we like to take into account a 3% cost of living increase. The way to include this on your budget is to set your year 2 cost equal to 1.03, that 3 is from the 3% projected cost of living increase, times the year 1 cost. That gives year 2 cost. Then for year 3, we would do 1.03 again, times our year 2 cost, since the cost of living increase would be applied to the year 2 cost. We can do that then for our other types of employment. If I am employing students in the summer, I should enter that in the summer rows down here. Again, I can include cost of living increase if the sponsor allows it. It may be useful to know that here at JMU, we generally consider the summer period to have 13 weeks, so is equal to 3 person months. Otherwise, everything proceeds exactly as above. The reason that we separate our academic year and summer employment for students is because of the fringe benefits section below. You can see that this template automatically includes FICA for all student employees. FICA funds Social Security and Medicare and has 2 parts. One part employees fund out of their pay, and the other part is paid by employers. JMU's share of FICA is 7.65%, and this is already included within our budget template. However, as we will now discuss, students are often exempt from paying FICA, at least during the academic year. The rules for student workers to be exempt from FICA withholding on the Finance Office's website shown here. The student must be enrolled at least half-time and not eligible for benefits. When it refers to the tuition waiver benefit here, it means the tuition assistance that is provided to full-time employees. Note that if the student is not enrolled half-time for the summer, they do have to pay FICA. Our experience is that student workers during the school year are typically exempt from paying FICA, but student workers during the summer are not, which is why we separate the summer from the school year on the budget. If you are unsure, we recommend budgeting with FICA included. Again, you will charge your actual cost to the grant, so if your student ends up being exempt from FICA, it simply won't be charged to your sponsored program. If you wish to budget for the student being exempt from FICA, then you can change the fringe rate to be 0 in the benefits section here. Typically, we would replace the word FICA with exempt or some other notation to explain why. You can see that as I changed the rate here, the table automatically updated to remove these costs. About funding graduate students from your sponsored program. As outlined on the graduate school page, graduate compensation generally has two components, a stipend and tuition coverage. However, the term stipend is a bit misleading here, as we explain in a minute. We recommend using the rates on the graduate school's webpage as starting points for graduate student stipends. As of January 2026, the standard PhD doctoral assistantship is $19,855 annually. Other students are typically funded as research assistants or graduate assistants, which as of January 2026 are paid $10,110 annually. As noted on the graduate school page, these amounts are not binding. Assistantships funded through grants may be paid at a different rate. However, we generally recommend that PIs use these numbers as starting points in their budgeting. If you are watching this video at a later date, please refer to the graduate school webpage for up-to-date numbers. Please note that graduate assistantships, as well as most research assistantships and doctoral assistantships, provide 20 hours of labor. Graduate students are also limited by the 1,500-hour rule that we mentioned above. Because there are specific work requirements associated with these stipends, in most cases, for sponsored programs purposes, they are actually considered as wages. Therefore, we would typically include supporting these graduate students in personnel costs at the top of the budget template. In this case, it's probably easiest to enter the pay in year one, for example, $10,110, and work backwards to determine the hourly rate. This is the pay for a single graduate student, and let's say the number of hours is 20 hours per week times 16 weeks per term times 2 terms. That 16 weeks comes from 15 weeks of class plus 1 week of finals. From that, we can take our year one salary, divide by a number of hours, and that gives us our hourly rate that we would refer to in our budget justification. For year 2 and year 3, this can be calculated as described earlier in the video. And again, most likely you would remove the FICA cost because this student would be expected to be exempt from FICA. Note that this covers just the graduate student stipend and does not cover the cost of tuition. If you are budgeting to support a graduate student, we always recommend requesting tuition support if the sponsor allows it. The cost of tuition support can be found on the graduate school's webpage, which we showed earlier in this video. Note that this cost is frequently, but not always, considered unallowable. This is because many sponsors do not consider tuition support necessary to complete the project. As always, please make sure to check the rules for your specific sponsor. For example, here's the NIH's current, as of January 2026, policy on covering tuition fees. If you can't find information for your sponsor, your grant specialist can assist you. If you want to fund a graduate student stipend, but your sponsor does not allow tuition costs, you may be able to acquire a tuition waiver. Please speak with your department head and/or college dean's office. Ready also has a limited number of tuition waivers available for sponsored programs applicants whose programs disallow the payment of tuition fees from grant funds. Finally, let's talk about the other way to compensate students, stipends. As mentioned above, stipends are not technically pay for work. Instead, their primary purpose is educational training or research support for students. They can also serve other specialized specific purposes such as housing or travel support. If you are bringing students from elsewhere to JMU for your program, they will typically be compensated through stipends. An example of this is the NSF REU Research Experiences for Undergraduates program. Note that many graduate student fellowships are also stipends, and students that are funded through training grants typically receive stipends, whether undergraduate or graduate students. Now, how much should your stipend be? Your program solicitation may give guidance on the amount. For example, as of the recording of this video, the NSF REU solicitation currently says student stipends for summer REU sites are expected to be approximately $700 per student per week. Most training grants and fellowships will also specify the amount. If the solicitation doesn't give guidance, we recommend that you consider the time commitment and use that to determine an appropriate stipend amount. If your stipend is for a specific purpose, such as travel, or housing, you may be able to use the GSA rate to determine it. Please refer to our video on travel costs for more information. Is where to put these stipends on the budget. Sometimes the solicitation will give specific instructions. For example, the NSF REU solicitation says all student costs should be entered as participant support costs. And so if you are preparing a proposal for this program, that is where the stipends would go. If you look at our NSF specific template, you'll see this category towards the bottom, right here. And within this category, there is a specific line for stipends where you can enter these costs. This is also in our R&R budget template. Again, similarly, there's participant support costs and then stipends at this line. If you are using a program that refers to participant support costs, you will generally be using one of these two budget templates rather than our general budget template. If the solicitation isn't clear, please consult with your grants specialist about where the stipends should go. If it isn't in participant support costs, it may be under other direct costs. Please note that participant support costs are excluded from indirect costs, so this is a rather significant difference. Since stipends are not wages, it is not appropriate to calculate any associated fringe benefits, including FICA. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope this helps to clarify some of the many issues around supporting students on your sponsored program. Thank you for your dedication to supporting JMU's educational mission. We look forward to assisting you here in the Office of Sponsored Programs Administrative Services.